Hey everyone, Dr. Liebreich here for your Intro to Sociology Week 1 video. So typically I will have a video that I've created myself and you will watch that each week, and then there will also be a PowerPoint as well. So here we are. I'm really excited. This is my first class at Elmhurst University. Although it is not my first time teaching Intro to Sociology, I've been teaching this class for about 11 years at this point. All right. And so today we're just going to go over introductions of ourselves, as well as chapter 1 and 2 foundational terms for our field. I always give an agenda. I suppose this is a little more important in face-to-face synchronous classes, but I still want you to sort of know what to expect in the slides as we progress. So introductions, I'm going to cover what our main assignments are going to look like this summer session, and then I'll get into some of the foundational terms in our field and lecture on that, followed by exit pass, which I'll explain what that is when we get to that slide, and then ending with reminders. So these are the things that you need to be working on throughout the week, including assignments and homework and that sort of thing. All right. Moving right along, I'm going to introduce myself. So my name is Dr. Liebreich. You can see I have it spelled phonetically there. Students always ask me that, so I started offering it. And my pronouns are she, her. I'm originally from Central Ohio, so being in Illinois, perhaps some of you are familiar with that area, just east of Columbus. And I did my bachelor degree at Ohio State University, my master's degree at West Virginia University, and then I completed my PhD, which is why I'm a doctor, at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. So I've been all over, and at West Virginia and University of Hawaii, I had the opportunity to teach a lot of classes, including some sections of Introduction to Sociology. I'm here because I want to teach and learn from you all. I view the learning process as very reflexive. So while I'm the instructor on record, my hope and my goal for our class is that I will learn from you all by reading your discussion posts weekly and seeing what you write about for your paper and that sort of thing. So I want it to be a sort of two-way street, you might say. I'm also new to Elmhurst, so I've never lived in Illinois before. This is my first class I'm teaching at Elmhurst, and so I'm really excited to learn more about the area, the university, and you all as students. Each university I've been at has had a unique student body population that I have to get to know. And so anything you might want to tell me about all those things, campus life, that stuff, is very much appreciated. And then my fun fact is that I'm a freshman. I always joke about that because, if I'm in my first year at a new school, it really feels like I'm sort of starting over in a sense, and that I'm a freshman. So I know a lot of you are probably incoming freshmen as well, this being an intro course. So if there's anything that maybe you don't know about the university as far as student resources, where to go if you need ADA accommodations, or perhaps you need to see a therapist because you feel like you're depressed for the first time. All of those things are new to me at Elmhurst, but I'm always happy to help navigate institutional resources with my students. So even though I'm new, we can learn together and we can figure out any sort of resources that you might need. And then usually in a face-to-face, in real-time class, I would have my students introduce themselves in real time. Obviously, we are online, we are asynchronous, so we can't do that. But this is just a reminder that you'll be completing discussion post 1, week 1, and you'll be introducing yourself in the same style that I just did. So I always like to say, I won't ask my students to do anything that I haven't done or that I wouldn't do. So I've modeled for you how I expect you to introduce yourself in your discussion post. And of course, there will be a prompt in that discussion post, but just for your information, you'll be talking about where you're from, where you last educational institution was, whether you're a transfer student or you're coming straight from high school, that sort of thing. Why you're here. So why are you taking a summer class? Why did you choose to go to Elmhurst, especially if this is your first class at Elmhurst? One thing you want to learn. And then, of course, one fun fact. And then another game I always play in my face-to-face and real-time classes is Two Truth or a Lie. So it's a little hard to do in an online class that's asynchronous, but here's what I always tell students. I think it's important for you all to get to know me on a sort of human level because it makes the learning experience more enriched, and it makes, I hope, makes me seem more accessible where you can ask me questions even if you're maybe a little shy or that sort of thing. So I love green olives. I'm an avid hula hooper, and I moved to Elmhurst in part to be closer to my sister. That's a picture of us. Okay, so the lie is that I hate green olives, but it comes from a truth because there was an ancestor in my family, I think it was like my great-grandmother. She absolutely loved green olives, and in fact, she asked for a big jar of green olives just like this for her birthday one year in lieu of a cake. So I always think that's an interesting story. And then my sister is part of the reason why I applied to Elmhurst and am so excited to move to Illinois. She lives in the surrounding area, about 20 minutes from the university. So I'm excited to be closer to her, and I'll be able to spend way more time with my niece and my nephew. They're little, so that's pretty fun. Okay, so my expectation is that students will take time outside of class to read the syllabus all the way through. But with that being said, we're in a condensed 8-week class. This is not a traditional semester. I expect you to do that on your own time. So I'm only going to cover in this video the most important stuff. And to me, I think that's the assignments, which is what your grade will be based off of, and then sort of the structure of when are things due and that sort of thing. All right. And so all assignments will be due electronically on Blackboard at 11:59 p.m. on Sunday. There's one exception to that. Your individual component of your weekly discussion board post will be due Friday at 11:59 p.m. The reason being, you also have to comment on at least one of your classmates' posts. So your comment to somebody else is what's due on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. I have found in all my infinite wisdom of teaching online classes for 11 years now that if I make both your individual and your response due on Sunday at 11:59 p.m., everyone will wait, or not everyone, the majority of students will wait until the last minute, and there will not be enough individual posts for folks to comment on. So that's why I have your individual component due on Friday. That gives you a couple of days where you can have time to comment on someone else by Sunday at 11:59 p.m. So I hope that makes sense. And there will be all of these details will be on the syllabus as well for your reminders. And then as far as discussion posts are concerned, there are 6 opportunities to complete a discussion board post. However, you will only be graded on 5. So if one week you get behind and you forget or you miss a due date, that's totally fine. You can do discussion post 6 at the end of the semester. However, if you get to the end of the semester and you have already completed 5 discussion posts and you've gotten 10 out of 10 on all of them, you do not need to do discussion post 6. So I always think that's a nice way to sort of help students who maybe missed something. I know these 8-week classes move so quickly. And then all of your other bigger assignments, so your midterm exam, your paper, your breaking a norm paper, and your final exam, those will all be due on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. And there is a weekly schedule in your syllabus that covers what assignments are due each week. But there will be a weekly assignment every week, at least one. All right. As far as the structure of the exams, they will be multiple choice, true, false, and occasionally I will throw in a short response question. However, there will not be an essay component to your exams. Instead of an essay, you'll be doing a paper. You're breaking a norm paper. This actually is a 2-part assignment where you'll complete the activity of breaking a norm, and then you'll write about breaking that norm. There'll be a formal rubric on that for that paper, and students will also have the opportunity to submit a draft of their paper and then get feedback from me so that if you need to revise your paper and resubmit, you can do that. And again, we'll cover that closer to that assignment date, but I just want to put that on the radar for you all, especially with this being an intro class. Sometimes a lot of students in my intro social classes have never written a college level paper before. So I always think it's nice to incorporate that revision process into the assignment. And that actually reflects the writing process that I go through when I'm publishing journal articles and book chapters and that sort of thing. There's always a revision process. All right. So I think the last thing in terms of assignments and structure is how many points can you earn this semester? Answer is 200 points with each exam. So the midterm and the final exam being worth 50 points. The paper being worth 50 points, and then each discussion post is worth 10 points, totaling 50 points at the end of the semester. And that gets us to 200. Again, that breakdown is on the syllabus, so you can be following along throughout the semester. All right. Now I want to dig into content. So one of the first things we have to do as part of the student learning objectives for Intro to Soc, we got to talk about what is sociology and how is it different than other fields, especially other fields within the social sciences. And so typically in an in-person, in real-time class, I ask this question to students. Think about the root word of sociology and some words that might be similar to sociology. And so take a second during this video, pause, and think about those questions. So you may have guessed that sociology has something to do with the social world or society, right? And that's all true. In sociology, we're really concerned with society and how society operates sort of at a high level. Now, oftentimes folks get sociology and psychology confused. I do think in a lot of ways, they're probably two of the most similar subfields within the broader social sciences. And so I always tell people sort of on a surface level, first day of class, psychology is the study of the individual psyche, right? That's where we get the word psychology from. And sociology is looking at people within that society. So groups of people. And I think that's a really good starting point for a lot of the stuff that your textbook is going to cover in chapters 1 and 2. Now, the next thing I always cover sort of on day 1, or in our case, week 1, is the people and the foundational theories that exist within the field of sociology. Now, some of this stuff might be familiar to you in other fields, especially when we go over Karl Marx and conflict theory, but these are what we consider to be the quote unquote founding fathers of sociology and sociological theory. I joke, if you walk away from my Intro to Soc class only remembering this chart with these 3 theorists and the theories that they're known for, I would be pretty happy with that because it really will root you in future sociology classes. So in order of this cartoon, we have Weber here, got Marx over here. And again, I would say he is probably the most likely known of the 3 foundational fathers of sociology. You might have learned about him in a high school history class or a psychology class, something like that, political science. And then Durkheim. Now, these guys were very philosophical, very theoretical. Their contributions make their way into lots of different areas of study. But for our purposes, really thinking about how they're rooted in sociology, we want to focus on Weber and symbolic interactionism. So actually, let me backpedal for just a second. They were all essentially writing around the time of industrialization, where society is changing in really big ways pretty quickly, right? So we're going from agrarian societies, farming, that sort of thing, to industrialized societies where factory work really becomes important. And so with the industrialization, more bureaucracies pop up, especially when we think about government agencies. And so Weber was really looking at what he refers to as symbolic interactionism and the way that bureaucracies make industrialized societies efficient, but it also dehumanizes the experiences of members within that society. And so he was concerned with, what does it mean that we don't know our neighbors and we don't know the people within our society that we might actually be interacting with on a regular basis? Now, sometimes students ask, well, what's a bureaucracy? And that's a really important question. A bureaucracy is any regulatory institution that's really efficient. Sort of the classic example we often provide in sociology is the DMV. So where you get your car tags, your license, and all of that stuff, right? It's very efficient. You're going to go to the DMV and you're going to get your license, hopefully, if you pass the test. You're going to get your paperwork completed if you have the money and you fill out all the forms. But you're probably not going to know the names of the people working there, even if you always go to the same place every year to renew your tag and renew your license and that sort of thing. And so that was sort of what Weber was looking at. Marx was worried about conflict theory and sort of the inequalities that exist in an increasingly industrialized society. In particular, the inequalities and the conflict that happens and pops up between people working in the factories. More broadly, in a contemporary setting, we would just be concerned with workers in general, not necessarily explicitly factory workers. And then the owners and the people who own the means of production. So back in the day, Marx was referring to the folks that own the factories and how there's this high level of worker exploitation. Now, we see this type of dynamic continue to play out nowadays. And if you think about something really big that's happened in society in the past few years, I'm thinking about COVID and the pandemic, we actually saw a lot of interesting labor issues happen related to exploitation. So it's a really interesting time to rethink how can we apply Marx's original work on conflict theory and labor rights to what's happening with Amazon as their workers unionize, especially after the pandemic. We saw a lot of unions have issue with, healthcare, lack of healthcare providing insurance coverage and that sort of thing because of the pandemic. Nurses unions and other healthcare providers that have unions, they really were having to advocate for their employees because of the high level of labor exploitation that was sort of a trickle-down impact of the pandemic. And then finally, Durkheim, this guy right here. So his main theoretical contribution to sociology is structural functionalism. Again, writing during industrialization, concerned with how do large-scale industrialized urban societies hold together without the bonds of tradition. So again, thinking about we're going from agrarian society to these cities, urban spaces, what's going to happen to our traditions and the things that hold our society together? Now, we know that society didn't just completely go kaput. We didn't devolve into mayhem, but society did change quite drastically because of industrialization and the way that bonds and traditions have been upheld because of that transition. There's been changes. And so as sociologists, we can start to look at the evolution of society because of large scale things that have happened like industrialization or like the COVID-19 pandemic more recently. Okay, so you're going to go over all of that stuff in your first chapter of your textbook. You're also going to be reading chapter 2 this week, which looks at norms and values. That will really be instrumental to your breaking a norm paper that you have coming down the pipeline. So don't sleep on the first 2 chapters just because your week 1 assignment is you introducing yourself. Because this is a fast-paced 8-week class, my expectation is that you will keep up with the readings. You're expected to read approximately 2 book chapters from our textbook per week, in addition to looking over the PowerPoints, watching my video, and I'll also have additional videos for you, TED Talks and that sort of thing each week. So make sure you're staying on top of all of that because it will be fair game for your midterm exam and your final exam. Now, this takes us to our exit pass. This is a way for me to collect anonymous feedback from students at the end of each week. Here, you don't say your name. Your responses are not attached to your email address you use or anything like that. It truly is a space for you to ask questions that maybe you're too shy or embarrassed to ask me via email. And so when you click this link, and you'll have access to this link because I provide all of my PowerPoints each week on Blackboard. So you'll download the PowerPoint from Blackboard each week, and you'll have access to everything on those slides, plus the link to the exit pass. And I'm just going to ask you questions. How's your week going? What are you learning this week? What maybe isn't making sense to you? Perhaps you have a specific question about the assignment that's due that week. These are the types of things that I look for. And so when I say that the learning process is a two-way street, I learn from my students in so many ways, but the exit pass is where I really learn from you all, and I can sort of make some changes to our semester based off of feedback that I'm receiving. An example of something sort of small scale that I've changed based off of weekly exit pass feedback from students, I learned early on for my online classes, I was having everything due at 11:59 a.m. so that I could spend my afternoons grading. Well, I learned a lot of my students are working and they can't make those deadlines because they work 9 to 5 jobs. So they asked, could you make the deadline at 11:59 p.m.? And this was a consistent thing. Lots of students were telling me. And I said, sure, if you don't mind me waiting a couple more days to grade your assignments, absolutely, I can change that time. And now I continue to have that 11:59 p.m. due date for all assignments in my online classes because of that piece of advice or that learning process with my students. Occasionally, students will be confused on an assignment. Everyone's looked at the rubrics, they've read the syllabus, and they're still lost on what the requirements are for the paper or what the expectations are for the midterm exam. I can do a class-wide extension as needed. Now, that gets a little tricky in an 8-week condensed class, but that is within the realm of possibilities. Additionally, you as an individual student can ask me for an extension on an as-needed basis. So let's say something wild happens in your world and you get sick, or your kid gets sick, or your parents get sick, or, whatever. Life happens. Life be life, right? I'm always happy to give you accommodations in advance, but you got to communicate with me early and often. Email's the best way to get hold of me. My email is my first name dot my last name at elmhurst.edu. So, and that, again, all that information about asking for an extension and when stuff is due, all that stuff will be on your syllabus, and everything is always downloadable from Blackboard. But I've digressed. I hope that is enough information for you for week one. Your reminders. Buy the book if you haven't already. I don't care how you access the book, if you get an ebook, hard copy, used, not used, old edition, whatever you need, whatever's most accessible and cheapest for you, that's fine with me. Make sure you're staying on top of the readings. I think with the exception of the last week of class and midterm week, you have 2 chapters from the textbook each week. Review the syllabus. I expect students to read that front to back. And then at the end, there's a class agreement. Once you've read everything and you sign that class agreement, you're going to return it to me. You're going to submit it on Blackboard. And that is a sort of contractual process where you've agreed, you've read everything, you understand the expectations of our class, of the assignments of our semester, and you're going to adhere to all those policies. Now, that's not to say you might not have questions pop up on specific assignments, or maybe something that's more confusing later down the road, but I do expect that you've read everything, and to the best of your ability, you understand the expectations going into our semester. And then, of course, you're in a complete discussion post 1 where you're introducing yourself to me and your classmates. And so your individual introduction will be due on Friday at 11:59 p.m. week 1. And then your response to a classmate is going to be due on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. week 1. That's all I have for you. I look forward to getting to know everyone throughout the semester. And I think it's pretty exciting that this is my first class at Elmhurst. Yay.